Hi, welcome to this episode of Portal to the New Earth. This is the very first week of January 2025, and I'm really honored to be joined by two of my really good longtime friends, the author Erik Davis and Jody Edmondson. And we all met back in 1993 was a formative year of me making a lot of connections. So that's over 3 decades ago. But this story is actually going to be spanning over 4 decades on this story of how I got a photo of Elon Musk in front of the 1111 Diamond Portal at Burning Man 2004. So thank you guys. Good to see you both for joining, and thanks for joining me today. And we're going to dive right into this presentation and have a conversation about this. And I think you guys were at Burning Man in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know how much you remember of this from that time, but here we go. So, Elon Musk at the 1111 Diamond Portal, Burning Man 2004, all started back actually up. Let me see, I've got to click and there we go. So, over 40 years ago, 41 to be exact, 1984, I attended Parsons School of Design from I was there from 1983 and I graduated in 85. And I'm pretty sure it was right there in the second year that not only was I learning about design, which you see this little paper model that I actually designed and made there, and we'll get into explaining that in a few moments, but more importantly than that, what else I was doing while I was at Parsons was reading a lot of interesting books. The one on the left, New View Over Atlantis by John Michell, very interesting book that really popularized the concept of ley lines, units of measurements, and how they related to ancient monuments like cubits and rods and feet and inches. And just the idea that the earth has this sacred energy grid to it that's detected through ley lines. A lot of incredible information in that, very influential in my entire life. But the other book is a channeled book by, it says Raphael, but shortly thereafter it was reissued under Ken Carey, the actual author. He chose a pseudonym because he had channeled it. And this is a Pleiadian channeled book that talks about the shift of consciousness taking place here on Earth, about how like the whole Earth is awakening and shifting, that we kind of see slowly still taking place at this point. But I've been aligned with this my whole life. And when I read this book, I resonated with it so strongly. And it was only in retrospect, 20 years later, which is still 21 years ago, that I decided to build this structure for Burning Man, that I started to think that these books had a major influence on how I came about to make that little paper model there. So after I graduated from Parsons, I was living in New York City, and I didn't really want to live in New York my whole life. So I went on this trip where I was living in my van for 9 months out west, and I ended up at the Ojai Foundation. And as part of living and working at the Ojai Foundation, they hosted a 5-day retreat in Joshuatree. It was the national monument back then, with Terence McKenna. And you see Terence is sitting down here, his wife Kat, his kids. I think that's Finn up there. I'm over here on the side. And we spent 5 days together. Now, I had already been very interested in psychedelics, LSD, and mushrooms, but I had not used DMT, which of course Terence is very well known for. And I didn't get to try it at this retreat. But like I said, we did use other, psychedelics, and I've been aligned with this idea of how psychedelics does open your consciousness to the shift that's taking place on Earth. So just wanted to throw that in there because it's way back and part of my, and also a big key is that Terence, long before Jose Arguelles popularized the December 21st, 2012 shift based on the Mayan calendar, Terence was talking about time wave zero and that time would end in 2012. And that really planted that idea in my head that we really are shifting and that there really is this major shift and end of a timeline in 2012, which, is actually very interesting. And I'll put that in the video description. There is a 4-part, 4-hour talk from this retreat on the psychedelic salon. And on the second and third parts, I'm actually talking with Terence, and I'm kind of discussing the idea that maybe 2012 isn't the end of time with him. So you could maybe blame me for 2012 not actually being the shift, and it's documented on these talks back in 1986. Okay, moving right along. So I then finally ended up moving out of New York and moving to Taos, New Mexico in the mid 90s. And I had heard about Burning Man. I actually was going to go in 1995 because a mutual friend of Erik's and mine was Spiro said, "Lee, Erik's going to be at Burning Man," but I backed out. We were in Taos, New Mexico, and it was so far, so I didn't end up going until 1999. And this photograph of the Burning Man, this satellite photograph, shows the the plan that started in 1999, where they use a clock layout to create the city, and the clock for the city just goes from 2 o'clock, center camps at 6, and it goes all the way over to 10 o'clock, and then from 10 to 2, and this photo is cut off, but it goes way out about another mile or so where art is set up in the deep playa. So it was very interesting using this idea of the clock to tell you where your camp is. Like if you were camped at 6:30, you would be on this road and you would be camped, A, B, C, D. So you could find yourself in the city, but also in the playa if a thing was out at 12 o'clock or at 11 o'clock. These are the ways that you navigate Black Rock City. So I started going with a bunch of friends from Taos. And here one year, Erik was giving a talk on Terence McKenna. I happened to take this very synchronistic picture of Erik. So I don't know if you want to chime in or if you have any memories of this talk, but it was so bizarre that his posture with the microphone in hand is identical to Terence's, posted right next to where he's sitting.
Yeah, that's funny. I was friends with Terrence and more colleagues I would say than friends. We'd see each other when he come through New York, and I was still, and then when I moved out to the West Coast, we hung out, and I talked to him just before he died, and this is after that. And yeah, it was funny for me, like because I'm a talker, I give talks, and I've been giving talks since I was a young man. But for many years, I didn't give talks at Burning Man because I wanted it to be like a place I didn't talk about. Like I just went and I just did it, and I didn't take notes, and I remember it in fragments. And then at a certain point, I was like, I think it's time to start talking. And in those days, there weren't a lot of places for speakers. That really happened just around 2003, 2004. And so I was part of that kind of wave. And then, within a few years, there were speaker spaces all over the place. It's one of the main things people did in the afternoons. So it was a fun moment for me. For me, it was like a shift in my Burning Man experience from the kind of wild, crazy, just completely like throwing myself into it to kind of being more reflective about it and kind of channeling some of the Terence vibe. It was very much a kind of Terence McKenna environment in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely channeling. I mean, that was incredible that that photo came about like that. So now our next photo shows what I was inspired to do for my first 4 or 5 years at Burning Man from 99 until 2003, because and now, Jody, sorry, I don't have a picture of you, but there's your beautiful wife, Gina. And what we are seeing in this photograph is in the background is Noel riding this chopper that our friend Cedar made in 1999, the first year I went. And he kept it a secret. And we get there and he busts out this crazy long, low chopper. And we're all like, wow, that's so cool. So right away, I jumped on the bandwagon and I started to make these low rider chopper bicycles at Burning Man. And that was like the focus of my art. Actually, so much so that I made this entire series of these chopper bicycles, and I actually try to promote them as a business. I came up with this logo for Playa Cycles, and you could see the variety from this most insane, crazy one that I left all with the original paints of the chopped up bikes and super long fork to a more practical one like Gina was riding. This one also practical. Like these three were the ones I was trying to really market. But I started off by making these double seat choppers that you could ride your girlfriend around on the back of. This first really big one, and then a second, much lower and more compact one. And so that's going to play into this story in a couple of moments. But that was my focus of my art and life. I've always been into bicycles, always been into making things. I had made a bunch of like this cool art furniture before this. And so now like I said, I was going to Burning Man 99 to 2003. And in the winter of 2004, I'm thinking like, I'd like to build a big interactive sculpture like the other ones out there that people are all climbing over and interacting with. And I started thinking about that little paper model that you see over here. So this was just made out of paper. And you see, I didn't even really finish it. The opening was just kind of like inferred with these pieces of foam core and a little paper skin on it. So the first thing I did was make a more accurate cardboard model. And you can see I used a tin can to define the inside, and it was just made of, cardboard and tape. And so what inspired this when I was at Parsons is we were learning about the golden ratio. And you can see the golden ratio is this underlying principle that's employed by nature in itself, and then humans have discovered this. So in this diagram that I, pulled off the internet, you could see that like just in a pentagram, a five-pointed star. Whoops, what happened there? Five-pointed star, the shorter length to the longer length is golden ratio. And, I'm not going to go into super detail, but the golden ratio is you take any length and you can divide it at a point where the smaller is to the larger as the larger is to the whole, kind of being depicted here. And it's found in nature, nautilus shells, pine cones, even the way plants grow. And then in your finger, even like each digit in your finger is approximately golden ratio. Even the orbits of the planets in the solar system are in very close to golden ratio relationship. Your belly button divides your height at the golden ratio. I mean, it's found everywhere. And then humans in architecture and art have been using it. Oh, this is showing in plants, phyllotaxis. So learned about this, and I just thought, I'm going to make a golden ratio inspired shape. So this is showing how, starting with a square, you taper the top to the golden ratio. And then in elevation, you divide it at the golden ratio and put a golden ratio circle through it. Then in plan, I made it exactly 1/7, which is a very, it's an irrational number, 51.4 irrational degrees, but that is the angle of the Great Pyramid. And as you'll see in this 3D depiction of it, it makes this perfect heart when viewed from a certain angle, something I had no idea about. And here is the diagram that is in my newly published book, Portal to the New Earth, that shows the same relationship of how this shape is completely golden ratio. But a very interesting aspect of the golden ratio I haven't mentioned yet, which was discovered by the physicist Dan Winter and has been employed by this company called Heart Math Institute, is that when your heart rhythms are in golden ratio is when you're in a state of coherence and bliss. And they sell these products to try to get your heart to become it more into these golden ratio phase conjugate of the EKG, the electromagnetic rhythms that are coming off your heart. And so there's a relationship between this. And then the color, very interestingly, came about through a DMT trip that I had in the 90s. I've only done DMT 3 times. And it was on the second trip, I was at the Rainbow Gathering in Wyoming and did a big hit, went out, some kind of like leprechaun kind of like being came to me and took me on this tour of the universe that is kind of beyond words. But but what I did come back from that was this color. And that was the color that I ended up employing. And I'll show you just in a moment how that came about. But before we get to that, I'll finish the story of the color. But green is the color of the heart chakra. So here we are at my desk in Taos, New Mexico. This photograph is taken after I have completed the next size model that was made really beautifully out of plywood and painted that beautiful chartreuse green. There you could see the little cardboard model. And and also on my screen, I'm working on promoting this. I've photoshopped it onto the playa to promote it before even going to Burning Man. And so this is where the story starts to take an interesting turn. While I'm working on building this model, it's very difficult to cut this angle on a table saw. It's a very extreme acute angle, a very dangerous and difficult thing to be cutting something that sharp and on a table saw. And right when I'm working on this friend of mine comes over. Now, I preface this, I've smoked cannabis most of my life since I'm a teenager. Not a whole lot, but pretty regularly. and I've taken breaks here and there where it's not smoked. And it just so happened in 2004, I was on a break. I was not smoking hardly at all, which meant that maybe I would have a puff once a month or less. So my tolerance was really low. I wasn't smoking any. This friend came over to visit me that grows really, really top grade strains. And he had this little, we just called him Smith. And I gave the name of this strain, I called it the Smithsonian. Well, anyway, he came over and gave me some. I took one little puff and I went into this insane paranoid delusion that by building the diamond portal for Burning Man and placing it at 1111, which I had already decided it needed to be placed at 1111, that by my intent, this is in the spring, and I'm not going to do this till the end of the summer, and I'm just working on building a little model. I smoked this and I was like, literally, my heart was pounding in my chest. I was freaking out that it was like a messianic delusion that I would be responsible for shifting the earth into the next dimension, that this was actually the key to do this. And a part of me knew it was delusional, but the majority of me was in this delusion and really freaking out, so much so that I had to completely stop working on building this thing, not even think about it. And it's interesting because you could see I have my nice iMac there. What I was doing then is I went back and I started photoshopping the chopper bicycles. And I remember making new designs in Photoshop just to get my mind off of the fact that I'm working on something so profound. And of course, I came down back to normal. I didn't smoke pot anymore. I didn't want to have this crazy. It was really scary, actually. My heart was pounding. And I'm like, okay, that was weird. And that was that. It faded away, back to normal reality. Okay. So then the next step to build it was to build this quarter scale model to figure out all the angles because I didn't CAD design. I don't know how to design it on a computer at that time. I still don't. And so what you could see in the shop, though, those two green panels behind it, those panels were done a good few years before, and I made those to externalize that vision that I had on that DMT trip in the mid 90s when I was at the Rainbow Gathering. And when I was thinking to build this at first, you saw the cardboard model, it was just cardboard. The first one was white paper. I actually thought to make it just flat black, like the monolith in 2001. Like you don't have to think of a color. And then I thought, flat black, it's just going to get the dust on it. It's going to be hot. That's a terrible choice for a color. And they're like, what color should I make it? And here I am working on it in the shop with those green panels hanging on the wall. And I was just like, oh, I'll make it that green color without any thought about green being the heart chakra color, though. It's just like, wow, that was the color that I got in that vision. There it is. It's a cool color. And you could see it's this cool mottled green that's made by mixing artist oil into polyurethane. So figured it all out, worked all that summer. And here we are out on the playa at 11:11, and you could see just how empty and how remote. I asked them to place me at 11:11 and a mile out from the man. And back in 2004, even though there were dozens of art pieces out there, probably maybe even upwards of 100, between 50 and 100. It was it wasn't like it was barren, but it was such a huge playa that it was really sparse. Nothing like it is today. And there you could just get the sense of that you're just way out in this desert looking back at Black Rock City. Now, in this photograph, of course, you see the central cylinder, the panels. It was so simple to build this thing. And then you see piled right here was a solar panel that went on top, and right behind it is a big speaker. That speaker had two strings attached to it. So that brings us to the quasar wave transducer. And so before I even went to art school, I was studying physics. I wanted to design amplifiers and guitars, and I was into the whole physics of music. But I dropped out to get my engineering degree, formed a new wave rock band. And late one night, while I was practicing my bass by myself in 1980 or thereabouts, I was like, what's the lowest note I can get the bass to feed back? And so here we're going to hear this hollow body bass leaning against a bass amplifier, and you'll even see the strings vibrating a little. Now, these strings are tuned to subsonic notes, but they're feeding back because the amp is driving them, making this rumbling, purring sound. So I invented this concept called the quasar wave transducer as like a sound installation, sound sculpture. And to make it work, you don't need the bass guitar. All you need are the strings and the speaker, because that's all that's happening. So that's what you see in this photograph on the left is me touching the two strings that are bolted to the front of the speaker to make this vibrating sound. And in this next photo, you'll see there was just a little access door, and I'm showing people inside of it. So here we are, and mind you, as you saw in that other picture, how far away the Burning Man was, you could hardly see it. This is a super telephoto lens taken from standing over 100 yards back from the portal. Like the portal at arm's length would have been just a tiny little thing. And then because of that, you could see the man standing up. I had a friend with a really good telephoto lens. I asked him if he could take this photo for me to show this interesting thing. But if you were right at the portal, you couldn't see the man through it. It was a mile away. It was a tiny distant speck, as you saw in that first shot. So here we are, Burning Man 2004. People immediately started finding it, leaning against the surface of it, climbing up into the middle of it. It's vibrating away and it's doing its thing. And it was really successful. Actually, I love to tell this brief story. Right after I set it up, some guy climbed up into it. He found it. It was like Monday afternoon. And he goes, "This thing is so cool. I'm never leaving here." I went back to my camp. We had dinner. I went back out a good few hours later to check on the portal, and he was still in it. And other times, with my other portals, I've said to people, "Hey, come and check this out," and they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Why not?" And they're like, "Well, if we go and check it out, we're not going to be able to leave." And I was like, "Okay, fair enough. Go do what you're going to do." So that was funny though that he was in there. And okay, so this brings us to the really interesting part of the story. Back to the chopper. I told you the choppers are going to play a key role in this story. So I had this chopper at my Burning Man camp. And some friends of other people in the camp came by and they're like, "Man, that's a cool chopper. Can I try riding it?" I'm like, "Sure, take it out for a spin." So him and his girlfriend go take this chopper out and they cruise it around, whatever, I don't know how long. And later then he brings it back and he's like, "Thank you so much. That was so much fun. Here, I want to give you something." And he hands me this, what looks like a rock. It's purple and orange and green, and it's dense, beautiful, one of the most beautiful looking things I've ever seen. And it's because this guy lived in Humboldt and this was his top shelf bud. And literally to this day, it's one of the most amazing buds of cannabis I have ever seen my whole life. It was dense, hard, and literally equal colors of purple, orange, and green with the flowers and the resin and everything in it. I'm like, "Wow, thanks a lot." Now, mind you, I'm not smoking pot this year. I'm not smoking anything. Haven't had any probably since that one puff, months ago. But he just gifted to me. I'm at Burning Man. We're all having fun. I've got the portals up and running. Everything's good. So I take one little puff of this and I go into this incredible, bizarre, overwhelming delusion. My heart's pounding again. And I'm like, "Oh my God. Burning Man knows that the diamond portal will shift the earth into the next dimension. And Burning Man's been infiltrated by covert operatives that when they placed me, and I had this sense when they placed me that they on purpose didn't place it at 11:11 just to make sure that it wouldn't work. And then in this delusion, they're watching me. Like they have the operatives all watching me. I get on my bike. I'm like, "I got to go out to the portal." And I'm totally like in this bizarre, delusional state of mind. And I'm like, "Okay, they're watching me. So I got to get out there, but I can't just ride my bike out there. They'll follow me, they'll see me. So I need to hitch a ride on an art car to get out there so that they won't see me." So this art car comes along. Now it's interesting because back then there were lots of art cars, as you can see that other one next to it. But this was by this guy Tom Kennedy. I found out later that was one of the original OG Burning Man art car builders. And I didn't know anything. I just said, "Hey, can you give me a ride?" And you could just see, I don't know, I think that might be the Diamond Portal way out there. But as I was telling you, it was way, way out there. Like you could see this in this thing. You had to drive a mile to get to it. And when you get up to it, there's just a few people and you're in the middle. You could even see the trash fence in the distance. It was just a remote location. So they give me a ride out there. I think this was on Tuesday when this happened. Because, and so that was it. They give me a ride out there. I check on it. They check on it. They park the art car there. And that was it. Nothing more interesting at this point yet. And I come down and I'm like, and actually I go back camp. I'm coming down, but I'm telling people this story. Like, I think that they're following me. I think that there's Burning Man's infiltrated. I think this, and all the people I tell it to, they're like, you're probably right. You're probably onto something. They weren't like, dude, you're tripping. Forget about it. There's no way that's true. Like, I got people to be like, you might be onto something there. Okay. Later in the week, I see the art car again. I think I don't know if it was at the portal or I told them to come out to the portal. So the art car that I made friends with that day comes out, but look who's driving the art car now. And I didn't know who this was until just a couple of years ago when someone went through my Burning Man photos. That's my good friend Doug. You can see he's on one of my other cool chopper bikes there. And there is Elon driving this art car. And for whatever reason, I'm like, hey, let me take a picture of you in front of the Diamond Portal. So this is 2004. I don't know who knew Elon Musk at the time. Of course, he was somewhat known for PayPal, and I don't know in 2004 how well known he was. But I take this picture, 2004, and of course, look at his crazy T-shirt that he's wearing, an onion headline. Holy shit, man! Fucking man walks on the fucking moon. So, and just for the fun of it, though, after this photo was found a couple of years ago, and I posted it, and actually someone who knew Elon sent it to him, and he got a reply from Elon like, "Oh, cool. I wish I took more photos then." So we know he's seen this. I didn't really popularize this one, but I thought this was funny that he visits the 1111 Diamond Portal, invents Tesla and SpaceX. So, but the
Did you have any
crazy,
conversation with him, Harlan?
just enough to be like, hey, let me take a photo of you. I didn't know he was just a dude at Burning Man with a cool art car. That's it. So just to finish off this whole section of where we got to in this talk, the fact that I met this art car when I'm thinking I'm being followed by covert operatives that are watching me, and then when I see the art car again, it's being driven by Elon. Coincidence? What does it all mean? So, before we even dive in more, if either of you guys, I mean, this is the brunt of the story of how this all came about. We're going to wrap this all up with a little more Diamond Portal stuff and that, but that you know and did the Diamond Portal shift the Earth into the next dimension? No, we're still stuck here. Was Burning Man successful in co-opting it by not putting it at 1111? Anyway, if you guys want to chime in with any
Did you
thoughts,
determine that it wasn't at 1111?
right when they placed me, I had done my own reckoning as best as I could. I didn't have a GPS. There's only so much reckoning. I'm pretty good at reckoning. I had a sense that it was slightly off from 1111. It seemed not precise to me the way, and they used a GPS to do it. And that was it. So, and also the people who placed me, I didn't know them. And I know a lot of the people in the art department. And they kind of came across as like the people that would be like a CIA covert operative. Like they were a little too normal, a little too regular. They weren't like these super hip, cool burner types. They were just kind of like somewhat normal, and I didn't know who they were. So that's it.
Very mysterious. I don't know. I think it's an important part of I mean, I can't speak for Burning Man these days, but I think it's an important part of the experience back then that you'd get into that kind of delusional framework. There was like, I remember very specifically the night it happened to me where suddenly it was like all like a mind control operation and we were all being videotaped and they were testing out new things. Because, you think about it, it's like, there is an intelligence agency. They are interested in new technologies. They are interested in manipulating people's minds. What better petri dish do you have than Burning Man? You just go out there and goof around. Who's going to catch? No one's going to catch up with you. So it makes sense too. And I think it's an important part of recognizing that even though this is a very avant-garde space of experimentation and new community and new consciousness, it has a flip side that it's part of the same order that puts a man like Elon Musk at the right hand of the president.
And of course, the fact that it's very conducive for taking mind altering substances and especially psychedelics, go hand in hand with the experience there. But then they do start to lead to these, like you were just mentioning, some experiences you've had, and I've had other ones like that on, psychedelics at Burning Man, where you start to see through the cracks and that it is some kind of like, psyop experiment. And of course, that, back in 2000, that crazy year, we had our camp all together. And I know Jody was there, and there was, LSD was flowing freely, and a lot of strange, things happened on those levels. I don't know if Jody, you want to chime in with any just thoughts relating to this relationship between Burning Man and psychedelics and the experiences that take place there, or if you have any personal insights to share along those lines.
It's interesting because recently I came across something that it's tangential to Burning Man, but it had to do with just the early LSD sort of experiments that the CIA was doing in San Francisco. So for folks who don't know, they had a couple of bordellos in the city, and they would dose unwitting Johns. And then they had two-way mirrors basically in the bordellos. And so there was like all of this crazy testing going on. And then at some point or another, the piece that I was looking into talked about how the whole basis of it was that they thought, oh, we can train people, by using LSD to be like, basically operatives. And what they found out is that, not only could they not train them to be operatives, there was that people on LSD were like not really able to concentrate on much of anything, and that it actually had the kind of the diametric opposite effect. And so then the thinking was, um, well, okay, now we have all of this LSD and you have all the social uprising, for instance, at Berkeley. Why don't we dose all these folks that are uprising, and creating political issues for us, and have them go chase around the Grateful Dead instead? So kind of drop out and tune in, and that'll get them out of our hair in terms of being upstarts, right? And now this is kind of out in the public domain that this actually happened. At the time it was unthinkable, like how could this even possibly be something that happened? So one would imagine that with things like Burning Man, for sure, at some point in the future, we'll find out that there was organized nefarious behavior amongst the authorities. I mean, obviously, you have like a large contingent of the authorities out there between the BLM and probably ATF and all sorts of other entities that are out there. And then you have like a much more of a cross section of society at this point than you would have had with, for instance, the Grateful Dead and people chasing around a band. So enter Elon Musk, or enter, not that I'm making an argument that somehow or another he was involved with any of that. I would imagine he was just another unwitting participant. And it was at a point that he was on the cusp of sort of what became, the rest of his career. I mean, famously, the guy, blew up several companies and ended up living in his parents' basement for a while, after PayPal. So, it hasn't all been, roses for the guy for sure. I mean, this has been a meteoric rise, here of late, not only with SpaceX and the Boring Company and, Neuralink. And I mean, consider Neuralink, where basically you're doing embeddings into people's brains, and the whole trajectory that they've gone with that. So I do feel like, there's kind of this interesting place, Harlan, where there's a paranoia, and it's easy to sort of attach it to, oh, it was a particularly strong strain of marijuana, or it was DMT, or it was some sort of substance, or could it be that actually these things were actually verifiably happening, which we find out about things like the CIA basically, and the Johns and the Bordellos. It's just that suddenly the cracks appeared based on the fact that your senses were heightened. So I don't know. I wrestle with this a lot. Is the paranoia actually paranoia? Is it justified? Is there actually something untoward going on, that you just don't happen to tune into until your senses are quite heightened? Because otherwise you can't really tease the signal out from the noise. So I mean, that's my thinking about it.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing. All right, so we're going to just wrap this up with a little bit more, though. So the next photo is this classic photo of Erik and his wife, Jennifer, at the Diamond Portal. But this one came up after people were talking about photographing orbs. Now, a lot of times you see orbs when you take a flash and the flash flashes off of dust and stuff. But here I am, the sun's at my back. It's not a lens flare. It's broad daylight. And in this photo alone, we see this one has 3 orbs, one up in the shadow, one there, and I blew them up here to see their detail. And then I took another photo, and now there's this orb down in the shadow here, and one right there, again, blown up to see the details. This, by far, is my personal most convincing photographs that documents the reality of orbs being able to be photographed. Again, crossing over from our normal reality into, we don't see these with our naked eye, but here they are floating around the diamond portal, clearly seen in these photographs, cannot be explained as a lens flare, cannot be explained as a flash reflecting off of dust. There you go. And it's just such cool photos. So how to throw them in. So let me just, do you guys have any comments on the orb phenomenon?
Well, I just not so much on the orb. I just want to say that this is one of my favorite pictures of me and Jennifer, and we have it on the wall even now. And just also just to appreciate how, I mean, I love all the portals, but just this is still my favorite, probably because it was the first one. But there's just something beautiful and unusual about its shape. Like it's not really like anything else you've seen, but it seems really familiar. It's so simple, and the inclusion of the wave transducer gave it this like hypnotic, amniotic kind of womb vibe. And so, yeah, for me, it's still some of your work is some of my favorite art that I've ever seen out in Burning Man, and I think it's criminal that the Borg has not seen fit to support your art with more cash on an
Ever.
ongoing basis. It blows my mind, Harlan. I've given
I,
people grief about it, but here we are.
I got my
I want to say,
14th.
if there's a conspiracy theory out there, it's that they're refusing to support you, Harlan.
I got my 14th rejection this year. I have gotten one grant though, but that was for the interdimensional space-time portal that was designed by this South African intuitive Maria that she channeled from the Elohim, and they were pulling the strings behind, to make it sure that she would have this piece, and I am working on a piece with her again this year called Om Mani Padme Hum. I am the jewel in the lotus. So we'll see if that comes about for this coming Burning Man. But now people are wondering, well, what happened to the Diamond Portal? Where is it? Well, I brought it back to Taos, New Mexico, set it up at this art gallery right at like the main intersection north of town. Here's a lovely photo in the middle of the winter with the snow. And I actually even hosted an event on 11/11 of 2004. And, it was lovely to have it on public display. It got blown over, nearly destroyed. I rebuilt it like new for Burning Man 2005. And then in this whole theme of the golden ratio, I built this golden ratio smaller version of it. So the base of this one is the size of the top. If you could place this on top, it would fit perfectly on top. And I placed it the golden ratio between it and the man. So I started bringing golden ratio into the entire Burning Man layout. So 2005, it returns. But funny enough, like I save everything I've ever made or had my whole life. Like, oh, this is really funny. It's just going to show up on the side because I'm not going to stop the screen share. But look, this is Diamond Portal Green. I got this Hot Wheels right when it came out in like 1968 or 69 when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And it's a treasure. I love saving things and, having this through time, holding on and treasuring things. So, of course, the Diamond Portal, I'm going to keep it and keep showing it. My friends were like, we'll help you bring it back to Burning Man, but we're not going to help you bring it back to Taos. You have to burn it. To burn something at Burning Man is not that easy. You have to pay for them to put down decomposed granite so you don't leave a big burn scar. And you have to have enough fuel in the thing so that the whole thing will burn up. And this thing, as you saw, was just made of a few panels and there wasn't much to it. So I came up with this plan for the end of Burning Man to fulfill my friend's wish because they told me they weren't going to help me bring it back. We put it on these wheels and we rolled it into the temple fire at the end of 2005. And that's one of the last photos of the Diamond Portal. Now, the Diamond Portal does live on in that I made these little pendants to give out as gifts in 2005. And ironically, this pendant is exactly 11 golden ratios smaller than the full-size 1111 Diamond Portal. And I just restocked them. So anyone watching this now who's like, the Diamond Portal's cool, I need to get one, you can easily get one of these little pendants from me. And I just love this. Let's see, we're going to skip. There's a video, which I'll put in the link on the Diamond Portal. So if you want to dive in more, go to my YouTube channel, watch the whole video. And this is the photograph that I used to close my newly self-published book of the sun setting through the Diamond Portal at this weird angle and this iconic view. And of course, the outline version is still just sitting right outside my window here. I've brought it to a number of festivals. Here it is at the lake at Symbiosis at I think that's sunrise actually. So I'm going to stop the share and back to all of us. That's the story and I'm sticking to it. So, it's, and also, Erik, as you just said, how that portal is your favorite and it's so iconic. Clearly, it's my favorite and the most iconic to me in that that's what I use as my logo for Portal to the New Earth, which is not just about the geometry and the sound and the earth grid energies that I use in the design of the portals, but it's my overarching interest. Why I went to Parsons School of Design in the first place to learn about the golden ratio is that I'm inspired to design visionary future eco-cities and eco-villages. And that's the whole focus of the book. And the idea that the Diamond Portal is like this iconic symbol of helping to facilitate this shift of consciousness so that we all will awaken to live in sacred harmony with all life and the earth itself, to see everything as sacred and to try to create the most beautiful, harmonious world. And that is what Portal to the New Earth is ultimately about. So
Excellent. You said it. You said it great, Harlan. This is so much fun to go on this return journey. There were a few moments in your talk when I got waves of memory, the smell, the taste, the vibe at the time. I hadn't thought about your marvelous choppers. I had my own chopper from you for many years that I kept a hold of until I ultimately gave it back to you. And some of my greatest memories by myself on the plow or cruising around on your choppers. So you're a really important figure for me in like the architecture of my experience at Burning Man. And so it's been great to go over this. It's a wonderful story.
Yeah, this means so much to me. Like I say, I treasure, objects, but I treasure friends and longtime friends. And the fact that this story here coming out in 2025, and I could have just sat down and done it by myself, but it was instigated because of a little back and forth that we just recently had. about, and it just came up that I shared that picture. And then you were like, I'd like to know the story. And I'm like, let's do this. So this was really great. So until the next Portal to New Earth, everyone who's watching this on my YouTube channel, you know the drill. Hit like, hit subscribe, share it, get it out there, help, get this video seen and, more people and to be inspired just to, create the new Earth. That's my ultimate goal. I mean, sure, I'd like to be famous, popular, and well received. We all have our egos that want to be stroked, but that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this just so that all beings, not just humans, all beings and all existence can just live in just, beautiful, heart-centered harmony. And yeah, and that's what we're facing right now. So thank you guys. It was so great to have you. So until the next one, we'll see you then.